Okay, so now that you've decided on a camera and a lens to buy, now it's time to decide what kind of stabilizers you should buy to help give your film some movement. Now, depending on your film style that you're gonna wanna shoot will depend on the types of stabilizer that you'll want to buy. So I'm gonna go over a few different stabilizers that I use and the brands that I'd recommend buying. The first and most common stabilizer is a tripod. Tripods are great for a shooting style that has little or no movement to it. My friend Haley Devine is a great example of somebody who likes to use a lot of tripod shots in her style of filmmaking. Now, I personally don't use tripods that often because my film style is a lot more movement oriented. However, there are still times that I do use a tripod, and the tripod that I own is the Manfrotto 055X Pro B with a 502 fluid head that cost me around $400 for both of those. I highly recommend buying the brand Manfrotto when looking for a tripod, as they are one of the most reliable companies bought by professionals for tripods. Of course, you can find a lot of cheap alternatives for less than $100 online, but if you want to be able to pan and tilt smoothly, then you're gonna wanna get a fluid head on top of your tripod legs. The cheapest setup that I've been able to find for a decent fluid head tripod setup is what I started out with, which is the Manfrotto MT290 legs and the 500 fluid head, which will cost you around $300 for both of those. The next stabilizer I'd recommend is the Glide Cam. The Glide Cam is the stabilizer that I use for 90% of the shooting I do, as it allows me to get smooth moving shots in almost any scenario. The Glide Cam that I own is the HD2000, which I got for about $450, and I also own a Devon Graham series Glide Cam, which costs about twice as much at $800. I often get asked which of these two would I recommend, and I like different features about each one. On the HD2000, I like the gimbal a lot better, but I like the Manfrotto quick release plate that comes with the Devon Graham series a lot better. So what I recommend to people is buying the HD2000 and then buying a Manfrotto quick release plate, which you can get for about $40 off of Amazon, bringing your grand total to around $500 and saving you $300 compared to the Devon Graham series. Now, there are cheaper alternatives out there to the Glide Cam, like the Flycam Nano, which you can get for about half the price. However, I wouldn't recommend it. I personally haven't used it, but I've heard reviews from others who have, and it sounds like the build quality isn't as good, and the functionality as far as being able to get smooth shots just can't match the Glide Cam. Again, you get what you pay for, so my recommendation is to save up and just go straight to a Glide Cam. Out of all the filmmaking tools I've purchased, I'd say the Glide Cam is the #1 best investment I've made, as it's allowed me so much versatility in my filmmaking style and brought my cinematography to a whole new level. So if I were you, I would put the Glide Cam at the top of your list of things to buy. The next stabilizer I'd recommend getting is a shoulder rig. Shoulder rigs are great for handheld shaky cam style filming or for more of a fly on the wall documentary type filming. I personally use my Glide Cam even for handheld style shooting, so I haven't found the need to buy a super expensive shoulder rig because I know I just wouldn't use it that much. However, I did buy a cheaper shoulder rig that I like to use from time to time, which is called the Cowboy rig, which you can get off of Amazon for about $25. That's about as cheap as it gets for a shoulder rig, and this guy gets the job done just fine, so that's what I'd recommend, especially for low budget. The next stabilizer I'd recommend getting is a slider. Sliders are most commonly used for very slow, controlled left to right or front to back movements. I personally don't use sliders very often because, again, I can get a lot of similar looking shots with my Glide Cam. Also, they are generally inconvenient and clunky to carry around. So even if I wanted to use it, in some situations I just can't bring it along. The slider that I own is a Cinovate 3-foot slider that has worked pretty well, but I personally wouldn't recommend it, as I think there are some better ones out there. If I felt the need to buy a new slider and were to buy one today, I'd probably look into getting an Edelkrone Slider Plus, which has a hidden dolly system allowing you to get front to back shots without seeing the slider in your shot. And it's also much more compact for ease of traveling. You can get one of the smaller ones for around $400 and one of the bigger ones for around $800 or $900. And the last type of stabilizer I'd recommend getting is a 3-axis gimbal. Now, I've personally used 5 or 6 different 3-axis gimbal stabilizers, and after trying all of them out, I'd personally say that the 2 most trusted brands out there are the FreeFly System Movies and the DJI Ronins. Each of these 2 companies has its own pros and cons and strengths and weaknesses, but after using all of them, I'd say the Movi is the best one out there. So I recently purchased a Movi M5, which cost me $3,000, along with a $500 Pelican travel case and a $1,500 7-inch small HD monitor to put on top, bringing my total cost for this setup to around $5,000. Now, that's a bit pricey for a stabilizer, so I'd recommend this being one of the last investments you make in stabilizers. And it's important to note that my 3-axis gimbal that I've purchased isn't replacing my glide cam by any means. I just like having different tools for different situations. Some situations that I like to use the Movi are when I'm hanging out of helicopters or out of the back of cars, where there's a lot of jolting going on and it's a lot easier to get smooth shots with a system that self-stabilizes. I also like using the Movi better than the glide cam when I'm doing close to the ground shots, because with the glide cam it's just harder to get smooth shots upside down. So again, different tools for different situations. Those are all the different stabilizers that I use and that I'd recommend. If you guys have any further questions, please let me know.